Well, hello there. Today we are learning all about fabric painting with my friend Sue McCarty. Sue's amazing talent inspires us to add color and pizzazz to our quilting. Also, I will be showing you the proper way to quilt around applique, as well as pointers on some of the standards of quilting. And finally, we get to meet Vicki Anderson, the woman behind Machine Quilting Unlimited. So stay tuned. There have always been standards in the quilting, and those are part of our technical skills, which is a huge thing for me on my custom quilting, something that I've advocated for years and years. And I want to just review that with you today. I want to show you the proper way to go around applique and keep your outlining with your stipple, and also you can get larger on your stipple if you make sure that you mark it and be consistent. And then I want to show you some examples of why we need to keep those standards in place. To start with, I want to do some marking around this circle, and these templates are so useful in so many ways. You can go around them with your machine, but you can also use them for marking. And I want to do tiny stipple in this area, but then I want to get larger because I don't want to do tiny stipple over this whole square. And it's going to be perfectly acceptable to do that if I'm consistent with where I'm doing that. The first thing I will begin with is to go around using my applique helper. I am going very close to the applique, and I'm using a contrasting thread. Normally, I would go around applique using the same color as the background, not the applique, but the same color of thread as the background. And I'll just take a couple of stitches there and put my applique helper on. And now I'm pushing down on those two threads, or I can even hold them up here because I need to make sure that they don't make a bird's nest underneath. I don't want to take a lot of little tiny stitches because when I come back around, I will need to secure it at that time when I finish. So I don't want to do that at the beginning. So I will start here, and using my right and left hand kind of in conjunction, I will go right close to this applique. And this applique is very well applied. There's tiny little stitches on it. And it was put on here with silk thread, actually appliqued on there with silk thread. Now at this point, I can begin my tiny little stipple, and this is another technique that I want to show you because I will be doing this little stipple around here. However, I am making sure that I come back and outlining around my circle. Do you see, if I go out and I do a little stipple out there, and then I come back and outline around the applique. So I call this stipple to outline, and it is so important because you will have some gaps if you use either too big of stippling or you don't come back and outline around the applique. I'm using 14 stitches to the inch, and I think when I go around applique, I really enjoy a little bit smaller stitch. 12 would be the very largest stitch that I would use around applique. Now notice that I went all the way around the applique using that tiny little stitch and outlining. Now I can go and continue to do this size of stipple out to the edge of the circle. So I'll finish that. I do want to show you one other thing when you're doing this. When you're doing really tiny stipple, if you will come out sometimes into like a little, it's not really a worm because you have to keep stippling, but as you're going around it, if you just come out like this into these little areas, that will help pull in all of the fabric. And then when you come back and fill in, you won't have, sometimes if you get going and you just have it in a line, you will have like a tsunami ahead of you, just like ruffles. And this will help you handle all of that fabric because it's drying up because of the amount of quilting that you are doing on it. So if you'll just kind of come out like this in these little areas as we're going around, then you won't get that ahead of you. And I have seen tucks and puckers on quilts, and I know exactly what happened when the quilter was coming around. All of a sudden she had too much fabric to handle. Now I am filling in between those areas, and you have to make sure that you're really consistent with your stipple size. And I want to show you a stipple strip. Everyone must have a stipple strip. And see, I can start coming out in this area, but the stipple's going to be a little bit larger. So when I'm in this circle, I have to make sure that it's all this size. And then as I come out into this area, it can get a little bit larger up to the edge of that circle. When I'm finished, it won't look like I have circles there. You can only see the circles because I mark them with the chalk. It'll just look like a natural gradation. So now that I've gone around both of those circles and stayed very consistent with that size, on the outside I can do an even larger size. And if you need to, you can have your stipple strip right up there on your machine to make sure that you are doing the right size. And I do, as I come around, try to blend that in if there's some areas where I can kind of just kind of moosh it in with the rest of the stipple. There we go. And I'm also going to do right on top of the applique. And I think for this I'm going to make like a dot there, come across and make another dot, come to the middle, come out, dot, dot, and then diagonally. I'll come out a little further on the diagonal. It's really important for the most part that you quilt on the applique, and I know some people just think that applique is sacred, but it's really there to enhance the quilt and to look really pretty, and almost all of the applique that I've seen needs to have some quilting on it. So when we get rid of our lines there, you can see it just looks like it's just been done beautifully, and you don't even know that you had some markings there. But we've accomplished what we wanted to do with raising up the applique. This is what I call a stipple strip, and I truly invented this stipple strip because I had people that worked for me and customers that came in, and we needed to know what size stipple they really wanted. And then we found out that this was a perfect thing to keep right up on your machine while you're stippling to make sure that you're doing the right size. And I'm sure you could do even more sizes if you wanted to, and you can also put prices on these if you're in business. So you can keep it up there and make sure that you don't slip in from number one into the second one while you are, at lunch. I mean, it's really easy to get your stipple bigger because you get in a hurry, and you need to be consistent with that. Here's another square with an appliqued circle, and this one is a very well appliqued circle. You can't see any of the stitching along the side, but I've seen this so often. Quilters will go around because they're afraid to go close to the applique. And what that does is it gives you a relief area all around that applique, and so it doesn't accomplish what you wanted to happen on that. Also, there's no stitching on this applique, so it just looks like it's poofing out from the quilt. The other thing wrong with this entire square is that the stippling is not consistent. It's a little fuller over here and closer together, and then it gets larger over here. And so when you're doing that stippling, it's so important not to slip from one size into the next size, because it just isn't consistent. This is quite large stippling for around something like this too. In this next example, we have another appliqued circle in the middle of the square. If you look closely or even touch this, you can see that the stitches are simply too large as far as the applique is concerned. Just too large of stitches. They're nicely done, they're even, but they're too large, and so you can see just about every stitch as you go around. It has been stitched in the middle, which is good, but it has not been stabilized around the circle. And if that had been done, even with a black thread, then this meandering that's all around it would look so pretty. The meandering design itself could have come a little closer, although this is one that would be harder to come in and outline and then go out like we do with the stipple. But you can see that uneven poofiness around the applique, and it just, again, just sticks out from the quilt. In this example, it's really, part of the problem is the applique and also not stabilizing around the applique. It just seems to float on top. The applique stitches are irregular, and there's large points of it that are missing, so it's not well done. It has been stitched on top of, and a little design has been done around it, but the stitching needed to be done right next to the applique. That would have really helped this. Other than that, this square isn't bad. It's kind of a large stippling, but sometimes we want to do a large stippling as long as we have done a smaller design around the applique in some way to accomplish the reason that we put the applique there, which is to really show it off. I hope you enjoyed those pointers on applique and on stitching around the applique. Good luck. Today we have Sue McCarty here, and she is going to show us all the different kinds of methods she uses to paint on the fabric. And I've seen the quilts, and I just can't wait to see how you use all of these.
Right. Quite often I don't want to quilt on certain areas. I like negative space. I think it gives the eye a place to rest, and it also adds dimension. For instance, in my quilt Harmony Within, the rocks that the Buddhist temples sit on, those were painted with artist paint sticks. So I've branched out, and I've wanted to do some experimenting with other mediums. So when I chose to do that, I created some samples. The samples that I used were actually computerized on my Statler. And this particular pattern happens to be by Tammy Finkler at TK Quilting, and isn't it just a beautiful pro wreath?
It really is.
And that's one of the joys of Statler. In this case, the background was also quilted for me.
And let's make sure that the viewers know that the Statler is a computerized gamma quilting machine.
And it's a dream come true for the quilting world. Right. So this was my first piece.
And this is on cotton sateen?
Yes, it is. I love cotton sateen. It's one of the most beautiful fabrics you can quilt on.
Very pretty.
So, Irina Bloom is just a wonderful lady, and several years ago I took a class from her on quilting with Prismacolor pencils. And you can also do this with another colored pencil called Color Soft, but this one happens to be Prismacolor. And so I colored it, and it looks beautiful on cotton sateen. And for more information, she has a book, Irina Bloom's book, Quilts of a Different Color. She also has a DVD, and I believe she's on the website.
She's on the Quilting School, yes.
Okay.
You can visit her on thequiltingschool.com.
So we'll let Irina teach us more about that. Recently, at the last HMQS, I took a class from Helen Stubbings, and this was on Inktense pencils, and it's magic, and we're going to play with this just a little bit. These perform, and they look just like Prismacolor pencils, but when you add textile medium, the magic happens, and we're going to see if we can get that to happen while we're filming.
Okay.
So,
now, does this fabric have to be pre-treated or anything?
I pre-wash my fabrics.
You pre-wash it, okay.
I do. You can also buy fabric. If you go to dharmatrading.com, you can buy fabric that is ready for dye, and you can buy silk, you can buy cottons, so you don't have to worry about it. It's ready for color.
Okay.
Okay, so let's pretend we are going to make magic and see how the color comes out when you add this textile medium.
It was like pastel, and now it's becoming bright.
And it's going to get even brighter. You might want to water this down a little bit, but for the show.
Will it stay that bright then, like these others are?
Well, we're going to add even more color.
Okay.
This will bring that out. And then we'll take our pencils. If you could hold that for me.
I would be glad to.
And then we're going to add color. Now look at that.
Oh, with it wet, sort of.
Yes. When the ink in the Inktense pencil gets wet, it really brings out the color. It brings out the ink in it.
So this looks like you can do this if you can use a coloring book, you know.
Yes, and it's so much fun. It's such a wonderful way to relax. Now, see how I haven't really blended that? I'm just going to use my finger and just kind of work that in a little bit.
Oh, neat.
Okay, and one thing about pencils, if they're sharp, which this one does not happen to be, you can really get down in. And I want to add just a little more depth, so I'm going to use a darker pencil.
So do you need to know a lot about shading or just kind of the basics? Or just...
Not at all, and play with it. And
okay.
you can see the areas that I didn't
kind of blend
get.
more in there with.
Yeah, so you just play with it a little bit, just like when you were a kid.
This is really exciting. You know, I
coloring.
kind of was staying away from color, but this looks kind of fun.
No, it is a blast. So that's a way, and of course we can go all the way around.
Looks like
and
it's
finish this.
applique, really does.
And I would heat set this.
Oh, you would, and
I
that's
would.
with just your iron and maybe a cloth over it?
Right, I would use a paper towel,
Okay.
whatever works.
Do you do that while it's wet, or you wait till it's all dry?
I do it while it's wet, mainly because I don't want to put my hand in it as I go around.
Okay.
So.
Oh, that could be a problem. You'd smear it all over?
Well, yes, it could be.
Okay.
Okay, so continuing along with my experimentation in color, this is another one. It was a craft paint, and I wasn't particularly happy with the flat color. So what I did with this is I mixed a powdered Pearl X pigment with a textile medium, and it turns into a liquid, and then we're just going to add some gold and just see how that just adds to that color
much
and gives
better.
it some dimension. You know, sometimes you...
I like this kind of sparkly effect.
Yeah, I have a kind of a glitter girl inside of me, so I really like that.
Now, the textile medium that you've been talking about, is that...
It's available at hobby shops, hobby craft shops. And, you know, this would be an excellent way, you know, if you wanted to pull out some more veins. There's a lot you could do with this, just in this particular piece. This is just playtime.
So, like, nothing's ruined. You can just do more stuff on it.
Play. And you know what? You could turn these all into little pillows and give them away for gifts or prizes. So that was that. Now, a paint that I really enjoyed working with, this is Color. And this is a wonderful paint. This is a metallic paint, and this I just painted directly onto the fabric, this wonderful metallic blue, and doesn't that sparkle?
Oh, this is my favorite so far.
It is.
Yes.
And you know, I just had to enhance with crystals. These crystals are from Sherry's Crystals, and I do use crystals a lot. I think they give life to a quilt.
Yes, and you use them tastefully, by the way.
Well, thank you. So this is just a fun little piece that I did to continue on. Another medium that I like to use, and this was a freehand piece that I did, and this is colored with artist's paint sticks. Now, these are oil-based paint in a crayon form, and you peel off this skin. This is an outer skin, and
so it dries each time, and you just keep peeling the skin off. I see. Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to try to do this without making a mess, and it's probably living a little bit dangerously, but okay. So I've peeled off the skin.
Okay.
You can see right there that I'm about to drop the skin onto my piece, so we'll be careful. And then you simply
just
get a
use
bit
your
of paint
brush again
on your brush, and then just work it onto your fabric.
Are these any special kind of brushes?
These are fabric brushes.
Okay.
I've also used hog bristle brushes with these, and been very successful. When I want to get into a very small area, for example, in my quilt Tribute to Tolkien, there were some very fine details. For example, eyelashes, and I certainly want to try to paint those. So I use these micron pens, and they're a very fine point, as you can see.
For fabric.
Right.
Okay.
And in this case, for example, this is a green. And if you can see right here, I'm not sure that the camera can pick it up, but there's just a little part of green that I didn't get, and I'm just going to brush on just a little bit of green over that paint and get real close. See how that filled that in?
Yes, because that's hard to get in there with a brush, and I can see that.
It is. And
oh,
especially
what a nice
points
tip.
like this, so it really works magic.
Oh, and I like this yellow in here. It just looks natural, actually.
And again, I added
On
a
those
few
irises.
crystals just for pop, just for a little bling for the quilt. And that way, when you have this extra dimension, see how this lifts all of this area, whereas I've densely quilted the background, so it gives another element to the quilt.
And the black is painted as well?
The black is also painted.
What a nice piece.
Well, thank you.
Beautiful. Well, Sue, you've given us some wonderful options in enhancing our quilts with color and shared that with us. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. I think it adds an extra element that certainly doesn't take less time than applique, but for me, it's more enjoyable.
Well, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.